Hi and welcome to Sturm und Drang. In this video we are going to explore how the concept of genocide came to be and how, even in its original formulation, it perfectly applies to Israel's criminal actions in Palestine. There is a general belief that the concept of genocide was invented to describe events such as the Nazi Holocaust or the mass killings of Armenians during World War I, and that using it to describe the current situation in Gaza would undermine the seriousness of that term. But to understand why this is not even remotely true, we should take a closer look at the history and works of Raphael Lemkin, the man who conceptualized genocide in the first place in his groundbreaking volume Axis Rule in Occupied Europe. Some of the claims I'm going to make may sound controversial or even outrageous to some of you, but all of them are supported by very solid evidence. In the link in the description, you will find the full script of this video, complete with footnotes, references, and screenshots of the academic works I cited. This way you can easily verify my claims, which I warmly invite you to do. So, who was Raphael Lemkin? Born in 1900 in eastern Galicia from a Polish Jewish family, Lemkin was a legal scholar who dedicated his life to, in his own words, making the destruction of groups of human beings punishable. There is a wide discussion among scholars about which elements of his biography sparked his drive to pursue his lifelong mission. But what we can say for certain is that, long before he formally theorized the concept of genocide, Lemkin believed in the necessity to create a transnational legal framework to prosecute crimes where the victims are not targeted as individuals, but for their national, ethnic, racial, or religious identity. As genocide scholars Anne Courtois and John Docker explain, quote, "In 1933, the year of Hitler's election to government in Germany, Lemkin sent a paper to a League of Nations conference in Madrid on the unification of penal law. He proposed that the crimes of barbarity and vandalism be considered as new offenses against the law of nations. Acts of barbarity, ranging from massacres and pogroms to the ruining of a group's economic existence, undermine the fundamental basis of an ethnic, religious, or social collectivity. Acts of vandalism concern the destruction of the cultural heritage of a collectivity as revealed in the fields of science, arts, and the literature. Lemkin argued that the destruction of any work of art of any nation must be regarded as an act of vandalism directed against world culture." End quote. What is important to note here is that Lemkin was not solely interested in preventing and punishing the direct physical elimination of members of a group, but also in preserving all the basic elements necessary to the existence of a group as such, including its economic and cultural foundations. Lemkin will maintain and further articulate this principle in Chapter 9 of Axis Rule in Occupied Europe, a detailed study of the laws and practices adopted by Nazi Germany and its allies to consolidate their control on the land and resources of the people under their yoke. According to Lemkin, quote, "Generally speaking, genocide does not necessarily mean the immediate destruction of a nation, except when accomplished by mass killings of all members of a nation. It is intended, rather, to signify a coordinated plan of different actions aiming at the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups, with the aim of annihilating the groups themselves." The objectives of such a plan would be the disintegration of the political and social institutions, of culture, language, national feelings, religion, and the economic existence of national groups, and the destruction of the personal security, liberty, health, dignity, and even the lives of the individuals belonging to such groups." End quote. It is evident that the original concept of genocide did not include just the Holocaust or other campaigns of mass extermination, but also every process in which an occupying power seeks to undermine the existence of a certain group for his own material advantage. Lemkin stresses this point when he says that, quote, "The enemy nation within the control of Germany must be destroyed, disintegrated, or weakened in different degrees for decades to come. Thus, the German people in the post-war period will be in a position to deal with other European peoples from the vantage point of biological superiority. Because the imposition of this policy of genocide is more destructive for a people than injuries suffered in actual fighting, the German people will be stronger than the subjugated peoples after the war, even if the German army is defeated. In this respect, genocide is a new technique of occupation, aimed at winning the peace even though the war itself is lost." End quote. I find that this passage perfectly describes Israel's genocidal strategy. By systematically destroying the Palestinians in Gaza as a group, the Zionist leadership is making sure that they will find themselves in a position of strength after the war, whether or not they will be able to achieve their military objectives. Another key aspect to understand is that genocide is conducted with different degrees of intensity according to material circumstances. As Lemkin puts it, quote, "The plan of genocide had to be adapted to political considerations in different countries. It could not be implemented in full force in all the conquered states, and hence the plan varies as to subject, modalities, and degree of intensity. Some groups, such as the Jews, are to be destroyed completely. A distinction is made between peoples considered to be related by blood to the German people, such as Dutchmen, Norwegians, Flemings, Luxembourgers, and peoples not thus related by blood, such as Poles, Slovens, Serbs. The populations of the first group are deemed worthy of being Germanized. With respect to the Poles, particularly, Hitler expressed the view that it is their soil alone which can and should be profitably Germanized. Now, replace Poles with Palestinians and Germanize with Judaize, and you get the essence of Zionism. But what I found particularly interesting is that Lemkin provides a detailed list of what he calls techniques of genocide in various fields, the vast majority of which, surprise, surprise, have been ruthlessly applied by Israel against the Palestinian people. The list includes the expropriation of land, homes, and properties of the targeted group and their distribution among the settler population, the imposition of the judicial system of the occupying power, the suppression of the national spirit of the targeted group through a rigid control of the education system and cultural activities, or through the physical destruction of cultural monuments and institutions, the destruction of the foundations of economic existence of the genocided group, with the aim of crippling its development, an objective which can be achieved by imposing strict regulations on the local economy, by diverting economic resources to benefit the colonizer, or by severely lowering the living standards of the native population. the depopulation of the undesired group, achieved by preventing births, and, last but not least, the physical debilitation and annihilation of the targeted group, carried out by restricting access to food, shelter, healthcare, or, of course, by direct killings. What is particularly striking, aside from the chilling resemblance between Israel's genocidal practices and those of Nazi Germany, is that Israel has been implementing many of those for decades, not just after October 7th. Which should probably help you realize that the current genocide against the Palestinian people, rather than being the action of a single criminal Israeli government, should be understood as the natural culmination of a long and meticulous process of violent colonial dispossession and ethnic substitutions, which was inherent in the creation and consolidation of the State of Israel. And that the concept of genocide, especially in its original formulation, can, and should, definitely be used in relation to Palestine, and anyone who tells you otherwise is either lying or has absolutely no idea of what they're talking about. In conclusion, Raphael Lemkin's contribution to the field of genocide studies and, more broadly, in shaping the very concept of international law can hardly be overstated. Nevertheless, he was not free of contradictions, and his figure should not be uncritically worshipped as some sort of ideal scholar or flawless human rights activist. For example, although he theorized a strong link between colonization and genocide, Lemkin held some very racist views and was convinced that Europeans had the duty of, quote-unquote, civilizing the Congo and other parts of Africa. And, even more surprisingly, for a good portion of his life, he was a vocal supporter of Zionism, who openly called for the colonization of Palestine. But it's important to mention that he buried his Zionist past after World War II, probably fearing that it would undermine his efforts to gather a broad international consensus for the Genocide Convention. The aim of this video is not to invoke the authority of a dead Jewish scholar to accuse Israel of genocide. There is no need for that, when we have an overwhelming amount of evidence of the apartheid state breaching basically every single article of the Genocide Convention. I made this video to shed light on the origins of the concept of genocide, to disprove some myths surrounding it, and more importantly, to explain why it is relevant to understand the current situation in Palestine. Recognizing this genocide for what it is will definitely not be enough to stop the suffering of the people in Gaza or in other parts of occupied Palestine, nor to give them justice. But it's a first, necessary step. At least, if you want to maintain your sanity and your humanity, if you, like me, live in a dystopian society where mainstream media and the ruling class constantly deny or outright support Israel's genocidal actions and go to great lengths to repress and criminalize those who oppose them. And that was all for today. If you watched up until this point, I really thank you for your attention. Talking about this topic is really depressing, but what's even more depressing is to see how poorly it is covered in the mainstream discourse. If you found this video informative, entertaining, and, in general, worthy of your time, and you would like to support my work, you can leave a like on this video, subscribe to my channel without forgetting to activate the notifications, and you can also recommend and share my videos with your friends and family, each one of these actions really help. As you can see, I try my best to produce highly researched, drama-free political content, despite being targeted by YouTube's censorship for my unequivocal support for the Palestinian cause. If you did not find my arguments convincing, please let me know why in the comments. I would really like to hear what you think. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.